Hi class! Welcome back. Now we are going to have another new lesson for today, and that is perception. In our previous presentations, we were able to discuss about sensation. So again, sensation is actually sensing. From its root word sense, it's sensing this uh, different stimulus from our environment and then feeling it through our receptor cells that send signals to our brain. Again, we have different body parts that is responsible for receptors. I mean sensations. Now let's go and talk about what is perception. Now let's go to the next page. Now let's define perception. Perception is the process by which people select, organize, interpret, retrieve, and respond to information. So if not perception, if sensation is actually sensing the external environment, and then from our receptor cells that send signals to our brain, perception, on the other hand, is the process wherein we select, organize, interpret, retrieve, and respond to the information from sensation. Okay, so all the sensation that we felt is being processed by our perception, or the process of perception is or the process of perceiving rather is what we call perception. Perceptions differ from person to person. Each individual perceives the same situation differently. So in uh, in uh, in a more worldview aspect, perception is something, again, making sense of what we sensed through the sensation process. Well, because it is only making sense out of the sensation that we felt, perception differs from person to person. For example, person A was able to touch an ice cube. So that person felt shocked and felt that the ice cube is cold. While person B touched the ice cube and then felt that it was like nakakapasok. Alright? So which one of them is correct? Actually, scientifically speaking, both of them are correct, because sometimes ice can be felt so cold depending on the person who touched it, and also so hot depending on the person who touched it. So there are also other perceptions. For example, a glass of water that is half. So other people will perceive that as the the glass of water is half empty, or for other people the glass of water is half full. So that depends on the perception of the person. Again, if sensation is the one that receives the sensory stimulus, external stimulus from the environment, and then send that signals to our brain, perception is the one that responds to it. So, and also our perception depends on the from person to person. That's why opinions that's why people have different kinds of opinions. And of course, opinions doesn't mean that it's a fact. Opinion is different from fact. So as you can see, perception differs from person to person. Individuals organize and interpret things based on their past experiences and the important values they consider important. Different people's perception depends on their life experiences and also their values. So that's why there are a lot of debates, especially today in our generation, and also to the issues now we are facing here in our country amidst COVID-19 pandemic. There's a lot of opinions roaming around the social media. That's because we interpret things based on our life experiences, or past experiences, and depending on our values as well. So that's why if someone's opinion is different than yours, it doesn't mean that they are wrong, and it doesn't mean that you're correct. Because sometimes they also think that their opinions is right and your opinion is wrong. Opinion is not a fact. Okay? Fact is something that is proven in scientific terms. However, in our scenario here in our country, any issues that we are facing right now can be every comments are all considered as opinion. Okay, so all right. So even though scholars are giving opinions on it, if you're going to notice it, even scholars, like for example doctors, medical doctors, their statements are counted as medical opinions, or like for example psychologists. Okay, so sometimes they are referred as the expert opinion. As you can see, because sometimes there are different opinions depending on the person who is handling it or handling the sensation. In general, it can be defined as a process that involves seeing, receiving, selecting, organizing, interpreting, and giving meaning to the environment. So like what I've said a while ago, if sensation is the one that is responsible of feeling and receiving information, perception is the response. Okay, so it is the response that we give to the environment that is from the external stimuli. So it's actually, in simple terms, it's making sense of sensation. Perception is making sense of sensation. Perception is the process by which an individual gives meaning to the environment. It is a cognitive and psychological process. Like what I've mentioned a while ago, it gives meaning to the external stimuli, and it is a process of cognitive and psychological process. People's action, emotions, thoughts, and feelings are triggered by their perceptions. So everything that we do is actually triggered by our sensation. Uh, everything that we do is from our external stimuli and is activated or responded by perception. So our behavior, the way we think, the way we act, okay, that's because of our perceptions, and that's because it is the response of the external stimuli that we've experienced. Since perception refers to the acquisition of specific knowledge about objects or events at any particular moment, it occurs whenever stimuli activates the organs. Like what I've mentioned a while ago, whenever an external stimuli activates our sense organs, it will be received by, of course, it will be processed by our receptor cells and then send that information to our brain. So that's what sensation is. So if there are no external stimuli, there would be no perception, because of course, perception is the one that is processing the sensation. Though perception has been defined in a variety of ways, it basically refers to the manner in which a person experiences the world. So here it states that it refers to the manner in which a person experiences the world. Okay, so there is the word experience in here. So meaning the external stimuli serves our experience, and from there we respond through our perception. Our perception doesn't mean that we act on it. Sometimes how we process things, how we think of it, our belief, okay, our values, okay, that's how perception, that is our perception rather. Perception is an almost automatic process and works in much the same way within each individual, yet typically yields different perceptions. So perception is something that is automatic to us. It doesn't have to be activated just to work. Also, that's the same thing with our sensation. So our sensation is something that is automatic. So we sense things around us. So since our sensation is automatic, same as our perception. Our perception works the same way. It is something that is automatic. Sometimes we don't have to think of it. It automatically appears to our end. So for example, we've seen uh, we've seen an adult, okay, around 20 to 25 years old, walking down the street and smoking. All right, so our perception of that person would be different from person to person. Person A would think that that would be illegal because that smoking in public places are now illegal here in our country and prohibited. Person B might think maybe that person cannot smoke in other places. Or person C might think that person is really rude to smoke in public places. So that depends. The opinion or the perception of each person depends. Again, depending on their values. All right. So a stimulus that is not perceived has no effect on behavior. Perception is a process that operates constantly between us and reality. Since perception is a subjective process, different people may perceive the same environment differently. So as you can see here, if there are no external stimuli, perception is not possible. Like what I've said, external stimuli, from there sensation will happen, and then making sense of sensation would be perception. And also, since perception depends on the different perspective depends on the values and life experiences of each individual, perception means that it is something that is subjective. So perception is like beauty that lies in the eyes of the beholder. Perception involves the creation of gestures. Perception is a unique interpretation of the situation, not an exact recording of the situation. Perception is more complex and much broader than sensation. So in here, sensation again depends on, perception depends on every individual. It differs. And also, because of perception, we were able to create gestures. So what is gesture again? Gestures, these are holes. These are holes, okay. These holes or gestures are come from the different fragments of perception from different people. So that's why even in personality depends from different theorists. And also abnormal behavior can also be defined from different aspects as well. From there we have gestures. Now, if you're going to define what is personality, people would say, according to Jung, personality is just like that, or according to Freud, personality is just like that. So in the whole, as gestures, personality can be defined by different theories, depending upon their research as well. Same with other aspects in life. If you're going to ask people, what is orange? Other will think that orange is a color, or other people will think that orange is a fruit. So that depends. Okay. So from the different fragments of our minds, which is our perception, we were able to create gestures. So in here it clearly states that perception is a unique interpretation of the situation, not an exact recording of the situation. So that's why nowadays it is very popular to have CCTVs, because of course, if one person will be asked of what happened to the accident, that person will answer only on what he or she remembers or thinks of what happened on the situation. And that depends, of course, there's a situation that the perception or the commentary on what happened on the situation would vary from people to people. That's why CCTVs are now very popular. And here, it says here that our perception is our own interpretation, but it doesn't mean that it's the actual happening or phenomenon in that situation. Okay, so we cannot exactly say what really happened. Okay, I can still remember in one of the Netflix documentaries that I've watched, it says that our memory sometimes deceives us. We tend to remember only that are that are somehow related to us. Like for example, the color. We can just remember the color, but the whole scenario of this whole scenario, we can't remember most of that. Just like in our childhood. Okay, so we can only remember those things that makes us happy or sad. So because those things are the ones that taps us most. So just same in the present situation. If you've watched something and you've seen a specific situation, you will only remember certain things that might be related to you. And that also may differ to other people. That's why perception is sometimes unreliable in some situations, especially if that situation is very controversial and needed the whole story, or people would want to know the whole story. So perception may be deceiving to others because no one knows who is right or who is wrong. Okay, because again, it is not the record of the situation. Okay, you are not telling what exactly happened. You can just tell only the fragments. All right. Perception is more complex and much broader than sensation. Because again, sensation is just sensing and perception is making sense of sensation. All right. So what are the goals of perception? So first, we have the recognition, localization, and perceptual constancy. So in here, we have first the recognition. It is the way of identifying what the object is. So once we sense something from our sense organs, through our perception, we were able to recognize it. Like for example, if you felt something tickling on your toes, you will recognize that it's your cat or your dog scratching scratching near you, and some of its feathers fur are flying. Okay, all right, so you were able to recognize it. And then we also have localization, determining what the object is. Like what I've mentioned a while ago, if we were able to recognize the tingling of our toes, we were able to localize, meaning we were able to identify that it's a fur from your pet. And then we also have the perceptual constancy. It refers to the constant appearance of objects. So since we were able to sense an object, so we were able to sense an external stimuli, we were able to process it. So that's become our perception. Since we have already perceived it in the past, we were able to recognize it already in the future. Like for example, if you've traveled a place and the place looks very familiar to you, it's like saying that I've been here before. That's because of the existence of perceptual constancy, meaning that the place is already familiar or you've already been to the place. Now, what are the importance of perception? First, perception plays a very important role in shaping the personality of an individual. So like what I've mentioned a while ago, since our perception depends on our values and life experiences, it also helps mold the individual, the personality of an individual. Okay, so personality, these are our traits, our long-lasting traits of how we respond and act or behave in a specific situation. Or, yes, okay, so perception in here plays a very vital role because yes, again, it depends on our values and life experiences. So if we collect all the perceptions that if we've experienced since we were a child up until now, it will make us, or it will give us a very, yes, it will give us a unique personality. Okay, and that personality would be, of course, our official personality. Okay, perception is essential in interpreting the world around us. So one of the importance of perception, it is the one that interpreting how the world around us, how our world happens around us. Okay, so we interpret it. Next, the importance is perception affects the outcome of our behavior because we act on the basis of what we see. So, perception, of course, as when we felt something, we sense it through sensation, and then perception process it. Our behavior depends also how we respond to it. Okay, our response from that sensation or external stimuli would be our behavior. So how we perceive the external stimuli will affect how we will behave. An understanding of perception is important to understand and control the human behavior. So how we perceive certain phenomena will depend, of course, again, with our life experiences and values. And from there, our human behavior is being molded, or yes, is being molded of how we are going to respond to it. Okay, and of course, yes. Okay, so if we understand how our perception works, that's how we will behave. Okay, so as you can see here, two of the highlights of the importance of perception, it is that it plays a vital role in our personality and behavior. Okay, so here are the principles of perceptual organization. So we organize our perception depending on the following. First, figure and ground. Two or more regains based from the region that appears to be more interesting and appealing to our sight. So let's have an example. So here is an example of a simple sensation, okay? So our eyes were able to sense the picture below, which is an apple in a white background. So that's already our perception. So in my case, that's my perception. So others would perceive that differently. Maybe they will say that I can see an apple that is a bit orange. Or other will say that I can see an apple that is not pretty. Or other people will say, I can see a poisonous apple because I can still remember Snow White. Okay, that depends. Okay, so in this picture, let's have my example. I can see here an apple in a white background. So in here, let's identify the figure and the ground. So the figure in here is the one that appears to be more interesting. And the ground would be, let's say, the background. Okay, so the figure in here is, of course, the apple. And then the ground would be the white one. Alright, so that would be the first principle of perceptual organization. We were able, or we identify what is the figure and what is the ground. So in certain scenarios, figure would be the story and the ground would be the background of the story. That depends. Okay, so the first one would be the figure and ground. Next, we have the contour. This is the boundary between figure and ground. So let's go back to the picture again. So in here, the boundary will serve as the contour will serve as the boundary between the figure and the ground. So for me, the boundary in here is the shadows and the lines of the apple. That makes it distinguishable from the background. Okay, so again, that's contour. Same thing with our faces, okay? For the ladies who loves to wear makeup, we have the term contour. So the purpose of contour is to highlight the parts of our faces that should be noticeable. So for example, in our face, we were able to highlight the I forgot how it is called, but it is part of the between the cheeks and the baba. Okay, I'm not sure how it is called, but we tend to contour that part. Okay, so for us to highlight our cheekbones. So in beauty, that is contouring. So that's an example of contour. Now let's go to the next one. All right, now let's continue. So we also perceive depending on the grouping. So in here, we have different kinds of grouping. So it depends on, first, law of similarity, law of proximity, law of closure, and law of continuity. Now let's go first to the law of similarity. So law of similarity is grouping depending on the similar tends to be grouped together. So in here it states here that if objects look similar, we tend to group them together. Alright, next we have the law of proximity. Elements near each other are grouped together. So in here, if the objects are close to each other, they are near to each other, very near, we tend to group them. Next, law of closure. Stimuli that suggest a continuous closed contour. So if they have, for example, it looks continuous. So for example, a line that has a simple break and then continues again, would for us it would look like that it's just something that is continuous. All right. Okay, so objects that looks continuous would be grouped together. And then we also have law of continuity. Link individual elements so that they form a continuous line or pattern. All right, so in here, individuals that are also look continuous would make a pattern. Okay, that would make a pattern or a continuous line. Okay, so just to make sure, okay, that's actually different. Law of closure and law of continuity are different because in law of closure, it suggests that a continuous closed contour. So there is a closure. So it is continuous, however, it will form something that it will something that will close, that it looks continuous. For example, an image that for example, let me say an image that forms circular would for us would be circular or circle. However, in law of continuity, for example, a letter S. However, that is not an S. That are just two curved lines. However, that it has a gap, it will look like that it is continuous to us. All right, and then we have the camouflage. Camouflage is the ability to blend with the colors. So in here, one example would be the camouflage of an animal. Okay, so we perceive as well in camouflages. Next is the figural after effects. Too much exposure to the object. So in here, if we expose too much to the object, we tend to actually familiarize ourselves with it, and then sometimes we were able to picture it to another non-related. Like for example, you're very used to seeing your dog. Okay, so whenever you see an image that looks like a dog, you will recognize or perceive it like a dog image. Like for example, our dog, of course, it has 4 legs and a tail and 2 ears. So if I look to the cloud, because I love my dog so much, and I used to seeing our dog often, so when I look up and look at the clouds, whenever I see a figure that looks like it has four legs and a tail and 2 ears, and of course snout, I will perceive that image as a figure of a dog. So that's figural after effects. And then we also have the perceptual expectancies and hypotheses. Similar are perceived on the way we make our expectations and hypotheses. So in here, our perception expectancies, our perception now have expectations and hypotheses if something occurs, okay? Because especially if that occurs in the past already. Like for example, here's an example. Someone keeps on telling you to say, what they call this? Uh, I forgot the English word for that one. Okay, so for example, our word would be your friend keeps on asking you to repeat the words to continuously repeat the word onion. Okay, so onion, your friend asks you to repeat it for 10 times. So onion, 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 and then your friend asks you, so what is bawang in English? So you will tend to say, that's onion, because you've already mentioned that in the past. So, however, the correct answer would be garlic. So same with perceptual expectancies and hypotheses. So if you were able to perceive it in that way, in a certain way, you will respond, or expectation and hypothesis on that specific situation may also depend on your perception and expectation on the previous exposure to it. Okay, all right. So now let's go to the next page. And then we also have the perception of depth. So in here, ability to see things in three-dimensional space. So in here, where if you've experienced, for example, going to a beautiful beach, so you were experiencing in three-dimensional space, and whenever you've seen a picture of a beach, whenever yes, you've just seen a picture of it, you will remember the experience of seeing a three-dimensional of it, meaning it has depth, height, and width. And then we also have the monocular cues, which is, here are the cues or external stimuli using our eye. And that one eye rather. And then we also have the five cues in monocular cues. We have the relative size, superposition, relative height, linear perspective, and interposition. So let's just go to it one by one. So relative size, meaning our eyes are able to recognize the different sizes, or the sizes that are familiar or related or somehow similar to it. The superposition, okay, and then we have the relative height, same with the relative size. The linear perspective, our perspective on a line, for example, and then the interposition. So I'll be discussing the superposition and interposition in our next in our discussion via Messenger. And then we also have other cues. We have the clearness, the shadows, and the texture. Okay, so let's go further. Binocular cues. If you have monocular cues, which is one eye, we have binocular cues using two eyes. These are cues that we recognize using our two eyes. And we also have the extrasensory perception. In here, it is the perception without the mediation of sense organ stimulation. So in here, it is the perception without the use of our five sense organs. So it is called the extrasensory perception. Okay, so other people keep on saying that it's a third eye, or I don't know how it is called, but it is the perception without the existence of our sensation, or yes, sensation of the external environment. Okay, so there are four types of ESP. We have the telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, and psychokinesis. We have the telepathy, that is the transfer of thoughts. So you were able to input some thoughts to other people, or other people's thoughts are inputted to you. The clairvoyance, perception of objects or events that are not available to senses. So in here, we were able to perceive what is happening uh, in a certain situation in a specific time. That's clairvoyance. And then we have precognition, ability to foretell future events. So in here, we can tell what will happen in the future, or in other people, it is the hula, or what will be happening in the future. And then we also have the psychokinesis, ability to influence the movement of objects by the power of thoughts alone. So in here, you were able to lift the objects using just your perception, okay, without even touching it, and many more. So those are the 4 types of ESP. All right, so that's probably the end of this discussion. So if you have any questions, please let me know in our Facebook Messenger chat. So thank you very much, and see you on our next video. Bye for now.